The crack of gunfire echoed across the vast Montana prairie as Lily Graham ducked behind a boulder, her heart pounding against her ribs like a frightened bird. It was 1875, and the promise of a new life out west had turned into a nightmare when the stagecoach she'd been traveling on was ambushed by bandits. She was the only survivor, left with nothing but the clothes on her back and the locket around her neck, the last remnant of her life back east. The sun beat down mercilessly as Lily trudged through the tall grass, her once fine traveling dress torn and mudded, her boots worn nearly through. 3 days she'd been walking, following what she hoped was the direction to the nearest town. 3 days with little water and even less hope. On the horizon, a plume of smoke rose lazily into the clear blue sky. Lily squinted, shielding her eyes with one hand, a homestead, perhaps, or a camp. Either way, it meant people. It meant help. With renewed determination, she forced her aching legs forward, each step bringing her closer to that promising wisp of smoke. As she crested a gentle hill, she saw it. A small ranch nestled in a valley, a weathered cabin with a corral of horses beside it. Relief flooded through her veins, but caution tempered her hope. She'd learned the hard way that not all who lived in this untamed country were welcoming to strangers, especially women alone. The creak of a door opening caught her attention. A tall figure emerged from the cabin, rifle in hand, scanning the surroundings with the watchful gaze of someone who'd learned to be vigilant. A man with broad shoulders and a stance that spoke of confidence earned through years of hard living. Lily hesitated, then made her decision. Dying of exposure in the wilderness was no better than risking her luck with a stranger. She took a deep breath and stepped out into the open, raising her hands to show she carried no weapon. "Hello there," she called, her voice raspy from thirst. The man whirled, rifle halfway to his shoulder before he registered what he was seeing. A woman, alone and clearly in distress. He lowered the weapon slowly, his expression shifting from alarm to confusion. As Lily approached on unsteady legs, she could see him more clearly. He was younger than she'd first thought, perhaps 30, with a strong jawline shadowed by several days' growth of beard. His eyes, a striking shade of blue, studied her with cautious concern. "Madam," he said, touching the brim of his hat, "you look like you've had a rough go of it." "The stagecoach," she managed, her voice breaking. "Robbers, 3 days ago." He frowned, his gaze sweeping over her disheveled appearance. "You've been wandering all that time," Lily nodded, suddenly light-headed. The world tilted sideways and she felt herself falling. Strong arms caught her before she hit the ground. "Whoa there," the man said, his voice gentler now. "Let's get you inside." He carried her to the cabin as if she weighed nothing, kicking the door open with his boot. The interior was simple but clean: a wooden table with 2 chairs, a cast iron stove, a narrow bed in the corner. "My name's Kieran Lynch," he said as he set her down on a chair. "Most folks around here just call me Lynch." "Lily Graham," she replied weakly. "I'm sorry to impose." "No imposition, Miss Graham. Not every day a half-dead lady wanders onto my property." His mouth quirked up at one corner, revealing a hint of warmth beneath his rugged exterior. "Let me get you some water." Lily drank greedily from the tin cup he offered, the cool liquid bringing immediate relief to her parched throat. "The Blackwater stage was hit?" Kieran asked, filling her cup again. "I heard rumors of a gang working these parts, but didn't think they'd be bold enough to attack a Wells Fargo coach." "They killed everyone," Lily whispered, the memory still fresh and horrifying. "The driver, the shotgun rider, the other passengers. I only survived because I was thrown from the coach when the horses bolted." Kieran's expression darkened. "The law know about this?" "I don't know." "I've been walking, just walking." She looked down at her trembling hands. "I have nowhere to go. I was heading to Virginia City to take a position as a schoolteacher, but all my papers, my letters of introduction, everything was in my trunk." A moment of silence stretched between them, broken only by the soft crackle of the fire in the stove. "Well," Kieran said finally, "you can stay here until you're back on your feet. I've got a spare bedroll. I'll sleep in the barn." Lily stared at him, surprised by the offer. "That's very kind, but I couldn't possibly, Miss Graham," he interrupted gently. "There's 50 miles of wilderness between here and the nearest town. You're in no condition to travel, and I'm not in the habit of sending folks to their deaths." He stood, adjusting his hat. "So you'll stay." "At least for now." Despite her exhaustion, Lily felt a spark of something like hope kindle in her chest. "Thank you, Mr. Lynch." "Kieran," he corrected. "If you're staying under my roof, might as well use my given name." "Kieran," she repeated softly. "Thank you." He nodded once, then moved toward the door. "Rest. I'll see about getting you something to eat." As the door closed behind him, Lily looked around the small cabin that had suddenly become her sanctuary. One room, sparse but tidy, a life pared down to essentials. So different from the crowded Boston home she'd left behind, with its strict rules and suffocating expectations. She hadn't told Kieran the whole truth. The stagecoach robbery was real enough, but she hadn't been heading to Virginia City for a teaching position. She'd been running away, fleeing a marriage arranged by her father to a man 3 times her age, a business partner whose fortune would save the failing Graham shipping company. Lily had taken what money she could gather and fled west, where she hoped to disappear, to build a life on her own terms. Now, penniless and alone, that dream seemed more distant than ever. Outside, she could hear Kieran moving around, the low murmur of his voice as he spoke to his horses. There was something reassuring about his presence, a steadiness that made her feel for the first time in days that she might survive this ordeal after all. With that comforting thought, Lily closed her eyes and surrendered to exhaustion. The smell of coffee and bacon pulled Lily from a deep, dreamless sleep. For a moment she was disoriented, the unfamiliar surroundings sending a jolt of panic through her until memory returned. The stagecoach, the walking, Kieran Lynch and his small ranch. She was lying on the narrow bed, covered with a patchwork quilt. Her boots had been removed and placed neatly beside the bed, and someone, Kieran, presumably had draped a clean flannel shirt across the foot of the bed. Sitting up carefully, Lily noticed her traveling dress hanging near the stove, the worst of the mud brushed away. Her stockings and underthings had been washed and hung to dry as well, though the thought of Kieran handling such personal items made heat rise to her cheeks. The door opened and Kieran entered with an armful of firewood. He stopped short when he saw she was awake. "Morning," he said, moving to stack the wood beside the stove. "Thought you might sleep the day away." "What time is it?" Lily asked, clutching the quilt to her chest. "Just past noon." "You've been asleep since yesterday evening." He nodded toward the shirt at the foot of the bed. "Found that for you, thought you might want something clean while your things dry." "Thank you," she said, touched by his thoughtfulness. He gestured toward the stove. "Coffee's hot." "Bacon and beans are warming. I'll step out while you change." After he'd gone, Lily slipped into the offered shirt. It was far too large, of course, but the fabric was soft with age and washing, and it smelled faintly of pine and leather. Kieran's scent, she realized. She rolled the sleeves up several times and used a length of ribbon from her pocket to cinch the shirt at her waist, creating a makeshift dress that preserved at least some of her modesty. When Kieran returned, he looked her over with a quick, assessing glance, then gave a short nod of approval. "Better than that torn-up dress," he said, moving to the stove. "Come and eat. You need to get your strength back." The simple meal was the most delicious thing Lily had tasted in days. She ate ravenously, aware of Kieran watching her with something like amusement in his blue eyes. "So," he said when she'd finished, "what's your plan, Miss Graham?" Lily set down her fork, reality crashing back. "I don't know," she admitted. "I have no money, no papers. I can't prove my credentials as a teacher without my letters." "No family to wire?" he asked. She shook her head. "No one who would help." It wasn't entirely a lie. Her father would likely help only to drag her back to Boston and the marriage she'd fled. Kieran studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "Well," he said finally, "I could use some help around here. The work's not easy, but it's honest. Could give you time to figure things out." Lily blinked in surprise. "You'd hire me?" But I know nothing about ranching. You have 2 hands and I'm guessing a willingness to learn, he shrugged. I can't pay much, but you'd have food and a roof over your head. Why would you do this for a stranger? Lily asked, genuinely perplexed. A shadow passed over his face. Let's just say I know what it's like to be alone with nowhere to go. He stood, effectively ending the conversation. Think about it. In the meantime, I've got work to do. After he'd gone, Lily sat at the table, turning his offer over in her mind. She had few options. With no money and no connections, her chances of establishing herself in a frontier town were slim. Teaching positions were scarce, and without her letters of recommendation, she'd be lucky to find work as a washerwoman or a barmaid. Staying here, at least temporarily, made sense. She could earn enough for train fare, perhaps, or learn skills that would serve her better in this rugged country than her Boston finishing school education. Decision made, Lily rose and made her way outside. The day was bright and warm, the vast Montana sky stretching endlessly above the rolling grasslands. Kieran's ranch was modest: the cabin, a barn, a corral with half a dozen horses, and what looked like the beginnings of a vegetable garden. She found him in the corral, working with a spirited black gelding that danced nervously at the end of a long lead rope. "I'll take your offer," she called, "if it still stands." Kieran glanced her way, a hint of surprise crossing his features before he nodded. "It stands." He turned his attention back to the horse. "You know how to cook?" "Yes," Lily replied, approaching the corral fence, "and so I can clean too, though I've never kept house without servants." She winced at how that sounded. "What I mean is, I'm willing to learn whatever needs doing." "Good." Kieran continued working with the horse, his movements calm and assured. "We'll start you with the house and garden. Ranch work can come later if you've a mind for it." Lily watched him for a moment, admiring the way he handled the nervous animal, gentle but firm. There was a quiet confidence to him that she found compelling. "Where will you sleep?" she asked suddenly. "I can't take your bed indefinitely." Kieran's mouth quirked in that half-smile. "Been thinking on that. There's a lean-to behind the cabin. I can fix it up, make it proper." "A second cabin." "For me," Lily was taken aback by the suggestion. "Nothing fancy," he said with a shrug. "Just a place of your own. Everyone needs that." "But that's too much. I'm only staying until I can get back on my feet." Kieran gave her a long look. "Maybe, maybe not. Either way, it'll be there." He turned back to the horse. "Could use the extra space anyway." That evening, after a simple supper of salt pork and cornbread, Kieran sketched out his plan for the new cabin on a scrap of paper. It would be small, just one room with a stove, a bed, and a table, but it would be sturdily built, with proper chinked logs and a real roof, not just canvas like the current lean-to. "I've been meaning to expand anyway," he explained. "Good place to store things in winter, if nothing else." Lily traced the simple drawing with her finger. "You make it sound so straightforward." "It is, more or less. Got plenty of timber on the north ridge. Been cutting and curing logs since spring." He leaned back in his chair. "With your help, could have it up before the first snow." "My help." Lily laughed. "I wouldn't know the first thing about building a cabin." "You can learn," Kieran said simply. "Everyone starts somewhere." The confidence he had in her abilities, despite knowing nothing about her, was both flattering and intimidating. In Boston, no one had ever expected Lily to be capable of such practical matters. Ladies were ornamental, decorative, meant to run households through servants, not with their own hands. "I suppose I can try," she said finally. Kieran nodded, satisfied. "We'll start tomorrow." And so they did. The next morning, after a breakfast of porridge and coffee, Kieran led Lily to the North Ridge, where stacks of felled logs were drying in the sun. He showed her how to identify the good ones straight, with few knots, and how to use the draw horse to strip away the remaining bark. It was hard, physical work, unlike anything Lily had ever done. By midday, her hands were blistered and her back ached, but she felt a strange satisfaction in the tangible progress they'd made. "You're a quick study," Kieran observed as they ate a lunch of jerky and hard cheese in the shade of a tall pine. "I'm determined. Lily corrected, flexing her sore fingers. There's a difference. Both are valuable out here. He passed her his canteen. Most folks who come west either adapt or leave, sometimes in a pine box. Is that what happened to you? Lily asked. You adapted, a shadow crossed his face. Something like that. Where are you from originally? She pressed, curious about this solitary man who'd so readily taken in a stranger. Kieran was quiet for a moment, his gaze fixed on the distant mountains. Pennsylvania, coal country. My father was a miner, mine collapse. I was 16. He said it matter-of-factly, but Lily could sense the old pain beneath the words. Came west after that, worked cattle drives, did some prospecting, eventually saved enough for this place. All on your own, he nodded. Mostly. Had a partner for a while, but he got gold fever and headed to California. A wry smile touched his lips. Probably still digging, poor fool. Lily thought about that as they returned to work. Kieran Lynch was a self-made man in the truest sense, carving out a life from nothing but his own sweat and determination. It was admirable and somewhat intimidating. Over the next few days, they fell into a rhythm. Mornings were devoted to preparing logs for the new cabin. Afternoons, Kieran attended to his other ranch duties while Lily tackled the household chores, cooking, cleaning, mending Kieran's worn clothing. To her surprise, she found satisfaction in these simple tasks. There was something rewarding about creating order from chaos, about the immediate results of her labor. And Kieran was an easy man to cook for, appreciative of even her simplest efforts. Never eaten so well, he declared one evening over a stew she'd made from a rabbit he'd trapped and vegetables from his small garden. You're earning your keep and then some, Miss Graham. Lily, she corrected him. If I'm to call you Kieran, you should use my given name as well. He nodded, a hint of something warm in his blue eyes. Lily then. A week into her stay, they began transporting the prepared logs to the cabin site. Kieran had chosen a spot just 50 yards from the main cabin, near enough for convenience but far enough for privacy. He'd already laid a simple stone foundation and constructed a basic floor frame. We'll start raising the walls tomorrow, he told her as they surveyed the site. That's when it really starts to look like something. Lily nodded, trying to imagine the finished cabin. It's all happening so quickly. That's the way of things out here, Kieran said. You build what you need when you need it. No time for dawdling. The next morning dawned clear and cool, a perfect day for hard work. Kieran showed Lily how to notch the logs and fit them together, creating the interlocking corners that would give the structure its strength. It was nearly noon when the sound of approaching horses interrupted their work. Kieran straightened, his hand moving instinctively to the pistol at his hip. Stay here, he told Lily, his voice suddenly hard. 3 riders appeared over the rise, moving at an unhurried pace toward the cabin. Even from a distance, Lily could tell these weren't ordinary ranch hands or travelers. There was something predatory in their posture, in the way they surveyed the property. Kieran stepped forward to meet them, his stance casual but alert. Lily, ignoring his instruction, moved closer, staying behind him but near enough to hear. Lynch, the lead rider called as they approached. He was a tall man with a pockmarked face and cold eyes. Been a while. Not long enough, Reeves, Kieran replied evenly. What brings you to my property? Reeves's gaze shifted to Lily, a slow, unpleasant smile spreading across his face. Heard you had company, thought I'd pay my respects. Now you have, you can go. The man named Reeves chuckled, but there was no humor in it. That any way to treat an old friend, after all we've been through? We're not friends, Kieran said flatly. Never were, maybe not, Reeves conceded, but we did have an understanding. You stay out of our business, we stay out of yours. His eyes flicked to Lily again. Seems like maybe you've forgotten that arrangement. Lily felt a chill run down her spine. What was this man implying? What kind of arrangement had Kieran had with these dangerous-looking men? I haven't forgotten anything, Kieran said, and my guest has nothing to do with your business. That's so. Reeves leaned forward in his saddle. Because word is she's the only survivor of that Blackwater stage job, the one carrying the Wells Fargo payroll. Lily's breath caught. These men, they were the bandits who had attacked the stagecoach, who had murdered everyone else aboard. I don't know anything about a payroll, she said before she could stop herself. I was just a passenger. Reeves's cold eyes fixed on her. Then you won't mind if we have a look through your things, just to be sure. She doesn't have anything, Kieran said, his voice dangerously quiet, and you're not setting foot in my house. The tension in the air thickened. Reeves and his companions exchanged glances, clearly weighing their options. 3 against 1, Lynch, Reeves said softly. Not good odds. Maybe, Kieran agreed, but I guarantee you'll be the first to die. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Reeves straightened in his saddle, forcing a laugh. Always were a hard case, Lynch. Fine, we'll leave you to your hospitality. His gaze slid to Lily one more time. For now. With that, the 3 men wheeled their horses and rode away, but not before Reeves called back over his shoulder. This isn't over, Lynch, not by a long shot. When they were out of sight, Lily turned to Kieran, her heart pounding. Who were those men? What did they mean about an arrangement? Kieran's face was grim as he watched the dust settle on the horizon. Trouble, he said simply. Best you go inside now, I need to check on something. Kieran, Lily insisted, grabbing his arm, tell me the truth. Do you know those men? Were you involved with them? He looked down at her hand on his arm, then up at her face. Something in his expression softened. It's complicated, he said finally, and not a story for right now. Please go inside and stay there until I get back. Reluctantly, Lily nodded. She watched as Kieran strode to the corral, saddled his horse with quick, efficient movements, and rode off in the direction opposite from where Reeves and his men had disappeared. Inside the cabin, Lily paced, her mind racing. What had she gotten herself into? Who was Kieran Lynch, really? A ranch owner with a mysterious past, or something darker. She thought about running. She could gather what supplies she could carry and set out for the nearest town. But the memory of those days alone in the wilderness, the vulnerability of being a woman on her own in this lawless country, made her hesitate. And then there was Kieran himself. Despite the unsettling encounter, Lily couldn't bring herself to believe he meant her harm. He'd been nothing but kind and respectful, offering shelter and work when she'd had nothing. No, she decided. She would stay, at least until she heard his explanation. She owed him that much. It was nearly dusk when Kieran returned. Lily had prepared a simple supper, more to keep her hands busy than from any real appetite. When he walked through the door, she could see the weariness in his face, the tension in his shoulders. You're still here, he said, removing his hat. Did you think I would leave? He shrugged. Wouldn't have blamed you. Lily set 2 plates on the table. Sit, eat, then tell me what's going on. To her surprise, he complied without argument. They ate in silence for a few minutes before Kieran finally spoke. I wasn't always a rancher, he began, his voice low. After my father died, I drifted, did whatever work I could find. Some of it wasn't strictly legal. Lily's heart sank, but she kept her expression neutral. Go on. Never killed anyone, he said quickly. Want to be clear on that, but I ran with some rough men for a time. Reeves was one of them. He paused, taking a drink of water. We rustled cattle mostly, sometimes helped move stolen goods across territory lines. And the stagecoach robberies? Lily asked quietly. Kieran shook his head. Never. That was a line I wouldn't cross. Too dangerous, too many innocent people. His jaw tightened. When Reeves and his new gang started talking about hitting coaches, I walked away, bought this place, went straight. That was 3 years ago. And the arrangement he mentioned, simple. I don't inform on their activities, they leave me and my property alone. Kieran met her eyes. It was the only way I could break clean without ending up in a shallow grave. Lily absorbed this, trying to reconcile the man before her with the outlaw he described. So what changed? Why did they come here today? They think you know something about the Wells Fargo payroll, or that you have it. He leaned forward. Was there a strongbox on that coach, Lily? Something the bandits might have missed? She thought back to that terrible day, the chaos and gunfire. I don't know. Everything happened so fast. I was thrown from the coach when the horses bolted, knocked unconscious. When I came to, the bandits were gone and everyone was. She swallowed hard. I just ran. Kieran nodded slowly. Reeves isn't the type to leave empty-handed. If there was a payroll on that coach, he would have found it. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. But he's also not the type to let potential witnesses live. The fact that he didn't kill you today means he's worried about something. What do we do? Lily asked, fear creeping back into her voice. We finish your cabin, Kieran said firmly, and I keep watch. Reeves is dangerous, but he's also cautious. He won't make a move unless he's sure it's worth the risk. And if he decides it is, Kieran's expression hardened, then I'll deal with him. The next day, they returned to work on the cabin, but the easy rhythm of before was gone, replaced by a constant vigilance. Kieran kept his rifle close at hand, and Lily found herself startling at every unfamiliar sound. Despite the tension, they made good progress. By sunset, the walls were nearly complete, rising log by log into what was unmistakably taking the shape of a small but sturdy cabin. Tomorrow we'll start on the roof, Kieran said as they walked back to the main cabin. Should have you under your own roof within the week. Lily nodded, but her thoughts were elsewhere. The encounter with Reeves had forced her to confront the precariousness of her situation and the growing feelings she couldn't deny. Despite his admitted past, despite the danger that seemed to surround him, Lily found herself drawn to Kieran Lynch. His quiet strength, his unwavering kindness toward her, the way his rare smile transformed his solemn face, all of it combined to create a pull she hadn't expected and wasn't sure how to handle. That night, as they sat before the fire, Lily gathered her courage. Tell me more about your life before, she said. Before you came here. Kieran looked up from the piece of harness he was mending, surprise flickering across his features. Not much to tell that I haven't already said. There must be more, Lily pressed. Family, friends, a sweetheart. A shadow crossed his face. Mother died when I was young. After my father was killed, there wasn't much left for me in Pennsylvania. He set aside the harness. No sweetheart. Never stayed in one place long enough for that kind of thing. And now, Lily asked, her heart beating a little faster. You've been here 3 years. Kieran's blue eyes met hers across the small space. Now I have a ranch to build, cattle to raise, a new cabin to finish. His mouth quirked slightly. Keeps a man busy. It wasn't quite an answer, but Lily didn't push. Instead, she asked, what about me? Do you regret taking me in now that it's brought trouble to your door? For a long moment, Kieran was silent, his gaze thoughtful. No, he said finally. I don't regret it. The simple declaration warmed Lily more than the fire before them. Even though I'm a burden, an added responsibility. You're not a burden, Lily. He said her name softly, almost like a caress. You work hard, you've made this place. He gestured vaguely as if searching for the right word. Better. Before Lily could respond, a noise outside caught their attention, the distinctive sound of a horse approaching at speed. Kieran was on his feet in an instant, rifle in hand. Stay here, he ordered, moving to the window. Lily joined him anyway, peering out into the gathering darkness. A lone rider was galloping toward the cabin, bent low over his horse's neck. One of Reeves's men, she whispered. Kieran shook his head. Don't think so. He moved to the door, opening it just as the rider pulled up in a cloud of dust. Lynch, the man called, dismounting quickly. Thank God you're home, Stevens. Kieran lowered his rifle. What's happened? The man named Stevens, a weather-beaten rancher from a neighboring property, removed his hat, revealing a face lined with worry. It's Martha. The baby's coming, but something's wrong. Doc Wilson's away in Helena. You're the closest neighbor with a wagon. Kieran nodded grimly. How long has she been laboring? Since midday. She's weakening, Lynch, I'm afraid. Stevens's voice broke. I'll hitch the wagon, Kieran said decisively. Be ready in 5 minutes. As Stevens returned to his horse, Kieran turned to Lily. I have to go. Martha Stevens is a good woman. This is their first child. Of course, Lily agreed immediately. I'll come too. I've assisted at births before. Kieran looked surprised, then relieved. That would be a blessing. Pack whatever you think might help. I'll get the wagon ready." 15 minutes later, they were jolting along a rough trail in the darkness, following Stevens toward his homestead. Lily sat beside Kieran on the wagon seat, a bundle of clean linens and what few medical supplies the ranch house contained at her feet. "Have you really assisted at births?" Kieran asked, his voice low enough that Stevens, riding ahead, couldn't hear. "Yes," Lily confirmed. "My mother ran a charitable society in Boston. Part of our work was helping poor women in childbed when they couldn't afford a doctor." She didn't add that her father had vehemently disapproved of this activity, considering it beneath their family's dignity. Kieran nodded, a new respect in his eyes. "Good. The Stevens place is isolated. Martha's mother was supposed to come for the birth, but she's in Ohio. It's just been Jim and Martha out there waiting." The Stevens homestead was a small, crude cabin with a lean-to stable beside it. As they pulled up, a woman's cry of pain echoed from within. Jim Stevens was off his horse and at the door before Kieran had fully stopped the wagon. "She's in here," he called, his voice tight with fear. Lily gathered her supplies and hurried inside. The cabin's single room was dimly lit by a few candles. On a narrow bed in the corner, a young woman lay writhing, her face contorted with pain and exhaustion. "Mrs. Stevens," Lily said, approaching the bed. "I'm Lily Graham. I've come to help." The woman's eyes, glazed with pain, focused on her briefly. "The baby," she gasped. "Something's not right." Lily set her bundle down and rolled up her sleeves. "Let me see what I can do." For the next hour, Lily worked steadily, drawing on everything she'd learned assisting the midwives in Boston. The baby was indeed positioned poorly, but with careful manipulation and coaching, she managed to help Martha through the worst of it. Outside, Kieran and Jim waited, the latter pacing anxiously while Kieran sat still as stone on the cabin steps. Finally, a new sound pierced the night, the thin, angry wail of a newborn. Jim froze, his face transforming with hope. Moments later, Lily appeared at the door, tired but smiling. "You have a son, Mr. Stevens," she announced. "A strong, healthy boy. Your wife is tired but well." Jim staggered forward, tears streaming openly down his weathered face. "Thank God," he whispered. "Thank God and thank you, Miss Graham." As he rushed past her into the cabin, Lily's eyes met Kieran's. What she saw there, admiration, warmth, and something deeper, made her breath catch. "You're full of surprises, Lily Graham," he said quietly as he stood. It was nearly dawn by the time they left the Stevens homestead. Martha and her son were resting comfortably, and Jim had pressed a fat hen and a crock of preserved peaches on them in gratitude. As they drove back toward Kieran's ranch, the eastern sky beginning to lighten with the promise of day, Lily felt a strange contentment despite her exhaustion. She'd been useful tonight, needed. It was a good feeling. "You saved 2 lives back there," Kieran said, breaking the comfortable silence between them. "That's not something many can say," Lily shook her head. "I only helped. Martha did the real work." Still, he glanced at her, his expression soft in the pre-dawn light. It was something to see. A warmth that had nothing to do with the rising sun spread through Lily's chest. She looked away, suddenly shy under his gaze. "What really brought you west, Lily?" Kieran asked unexpectedly. "You don't strike me as the adventuring type." The question caught her off guard. "I told you." "I was going to be a schoolteacher." "Maybe," he conceded, "but I think there's more to it than that." Lily hesitated. She'd kept the truth to herself for so long, guarding it like a precious secret. But here, miles from anywhere, with this man who'd shared his own complicated past, she found herself wanting to unburden. "I was running away," she admitted softly. "My father arranged a marriage for me." To a business partner, a man of 60 with a reputation for cruelty to his servants and his previous wives. Kieran's hands tightened on the reins. "I see." "I couldn't do it," Lily continued. "Couldn't sentence myself to that life, so I took what money I had saved and fled. I thought if I could get far enough away, start a new life under a different name." She trailed off, the futility of her plan now apparent. "Your father," Kieran said carefully, "would he come after you if he knew where I was?" Lily laughed without humor, without question. The marriage contract included a substantial loan that would save his shipping company. My disappearance would have cost him dearly. They drove in silence for a while, the wagon swaying gently beneath them. Well, Kieran said finally, he'd have a hard time finding you here. Lily glanced at him, surprised by the protectiveness in his tone. Yes, she agreed. I suppose he would. When they reached the ranch, the sun was fully up, casting long shadows across the yard. Kieran helped Lily down from the wagon, his hands lingering on her waist a moment longer than necessary. You should rest, he said. It's been a long night. Lily nodded, suddenly aware of her exhaustion. What about you? I'll tend to the horses, then grab a few hours' sleep myself. He hesitated, then added, Thank you, Lily, for going with me tonight, for helping the Stevenses. You would have done the same, she said simply. He smiled, a full, genuine smile that transformed his face and made her heart skip. Maybe, but not with your skill. As Lily made her way to the cabin, she found herself smiling too. For the first time since the stagecoach attack, perhaps for the first time in years, she felt like she might have found a place where she truly belonged. The days that followed took on a rhythm all their own. Mornings were devoted to work on Lily's cabin, which was progressing rapidly. By the end of the week, the roof was on, the chimney built, and Kieran had begun crafting simple furniture for the interior: a bed frame, a table, a chair. Afternoons, Lily tended to the household and garden while Kieran saw to his ranch duties. She discovered an unexpected talent for coaxing vegetables from the rocky Montana soil, expanding the small garden plot until it promised a bounty that would see them through the coming winter. Evenings were the time Lily treasured most. After supper, she and Kieran would sit before the fire, talking long into the night. He told her stories of his travels across the West, the cattle drives through Texas, the mining camps of Colorado, the vast emptiness of the Dakota plains. In return, she shared tales of Boston society, the restrictive rules and expectations that had chafed at her spirit from an early age. With each passing day, the tension between them grew, a sweet, expectant tension that neither seemed quite ready to acknowledge. Lily would catch Kieran watching her sometimes, a softness in his eyes that made her breath catch. And she knew he noticed the way she lingered near him, finding excuses for their hands to brush when passing tools or dishes. It was during one such evening, as they sat companionably before the fire, that Kieran broached a subject they'd both been avoiding. We should talk about what happens next, he said, setting aside the bridle he'd been repairing. Your cabin will be finished soon. Lily's hands stilled on the shirt she was mending. Yes, she said carefully, it's coming along beautifully. Thing is, Kieran continued, his gaze fixed on the dancing flames, I've been thinking about Reeves and his men. They haven't returned, but that doesn't mean they won't. You think I should leave? Lily asked, her heart sinking. Kieran looked up quickly. No, that's not, he stopped, gathering his thoughts. What I'm saying is, it might be safer if people thought you had more of a reason to be here, a permanent reason. Lily frowned, not following. What do you mean? Kieran cleared his throat, suddenly looking uncomfortable. Out here, a woman living alone on a man's property, even in her own cabin, it invites talk and attention. Oh, Lily felt her cheeks warm as she understood his meaning. You're concerned for my reputation. For your safety, he corrected. Though reputation matters too, I suppose. What are you suggesting, Kieran? He met her eyes then, his expression serious. A partnership, on paper at least. We could register the cabin and a portion of land in your name, make it official at the county seat. A business partnership, Lily clarified, trying to ignore the flutter of disappointment in her chest. For now, Kieran said, something cautious in his voice. It would give you legal standing, protection. No one could force you to leave. Lily considered this. It was a practical solution and more generous than she had any right to expect. Yet she couldn't help feeling there was something more behind the offer, something Kieran wasn't saying. That's very kind, she said finally. But wouldn't it complicate things for you? If you wanted to sell the ranch someday, or if you married, The last words came out more hesitantly than she'd intended. Kieran's gaze didn't waver. "I'm not planning to sell, and as for marriage..." He paused, something shifting in his expression. "I haven't given it much thought." Until recently. The implication hung in the air between them, unspoken but unmistakable. Before Lily could respond, a sound outside caught their attention, the distant but distinctive crack of a rifle shot. Kieran was on his feet instantly, moving to the window. "Stay inside," he ordered, reaching for his own rifle. "What is it?" Lily asked, rising as well. "Don't know." He checked the rifle's loading, his movements quick and efficient. "Could be nothing, could be trouble." Another shot rang out, closer this time, followed by the sound of galloping hooves. "Reeves," Kieran muttered. He turned to Lily, his expression grim. "Get in the root cellar. There's a trap door under the rug. Stay there until I come for you." "Kieran, please, Lily." His voice softened. "I can't protect you and fight them at the same time. I need to know you're safe." Reluctantly, Lily nodded. She helped him move the table aside and roll back the rug, revealing a square trapdoor set into the floor. Kieran lifted it, exposing a small cellar dug into the earth beneath the cabin. "There's a lantern down there and water," he told her. "If anything happens to me, wait until full dark, then make for the Stevens place. Jim will help you." "Don't talk like that," Lily said, suddenly afraid. "You'll be fine." Kieran's expression softened. He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I hope so," he said quietly. "There's a lot I still want to say to you." Before Lily could respond, more shots echoed outside, very close now. Kieran helped her down into the cellar, their eyes locking one last time before he closed the trap door, plunging her into darkness. Lily fumbled for the lantern, her hands shaking. She found it and a box of matches beside it, managing to light the wick despite her trembling fingers. The small flame illuminated her hiding place, a root cellar perhaps 8 feet square, with shelves of preserved food along one wall and a small barrel of water in the corner. Above, she could hear Kieran moving around, the solid thunk as he barred the cabin door. Then silence. Time stretched endlessly in the confined space. Lily strained to hear what was happening outside, but the thick floorboards muffled most sounds. Occasionally, she caught the stamp of a horse's hoof, a shout that might have been Kieran's voice or someone else's. Then came the sound she'd been dreading: gunfire, multiple shots in rapid succession, followed by a crash that shook dust from the cellar ceiling. Men's voices, loud and angry, the heavy tread of boots on the cabin floor above her head. "Where is she, Lynch?" A voice Lily recognized as Reeves's, full of malice. "Where's the girl?" Kieran's response was too low to make out clearly, but its tone was defiant. "Search the place," Reeves ordered. "She's here somewhere." Lily pressed herself into the darkest corner of the cellar, heart pounding so loudly she was certain they must hear it. Footsteps crisscrossed the floor above, furniture being moved, doors flung open. "Nothing, boss," a new voice reported. "She ain't here, she has to be," Reeves insisted. "Or Lynch wouldn't be so damn calm about this." More movement, more searching. Lily held her breath as someone walked directly over the trapdoor, the boards creaking ominously. "Maybe she ran," the second man suggested. "Heard us coming and took off." A pause, then Reeves again. "Maybe." "We'll find her either way." His voice hardened. "One last chance, Lynch. Tell us where the girl is and where she hid the money, and maybe you walk away from this." Again, Kieran's response was too quiet to hear clearly, but whatever he said made Reeves laugh, a cold, ugly sound. "Have it your way," Reeves said. "Boys, tie him up. We'll take him with us. The girl's bound to come looking for him eventually." Lily's blood ran cold. They were going to take Kieran, torture him probably to make him reveal her whereabouts. She couldn't let that happen. Moving as quietly as possible, she searched the cellar for anything that might serve as a weapon. The shelves yielded nothing useful, but behind the water barrel, she found a rusted but still serviceable skinning knife. Above, the sounds of a struggle broke out, Kieran fighting back despite being outnumbered. A gunshot made Lily jump, followed by a heavy thud and a groan of pain. "Damn it, Fletcher," Reeves shouted. "I said we need him alive." "He's alive." another voice responded sullenly. Just winged him. Kieran had been shot. The knowledge galvanized Lily. She couldn't hide while they took him, couldn't save herself at the cost of his life. Decision made, she blew out the lantern and moved toward the trapdoor, knife clutched in her shaking hand. Just as she was about to push it open, a new sound froze her in place, more hoofbeats approaching, and men's voices calling out. "Lynch, you in there? It's Marshal Dawson." The unexpected arrival sent Reeves and his men into panicked motion. Boots pounded across the floor as they rushed for the door. "It's the law," one of them shouted. "We gotta go." "What about Lynch?" another asked. "Leave him," Reeves ordered. "We'll deal with him later. Mount up." The sound of retreating hoofbeats told Lily that Reeves and his gang were fleeing. Above, the cabin door crashed open again. "Lynch?" A new voice, authoritative. "Good God, man, you're bleeding." Lily pushed open the trapdoor without hesitation, emerging from the cellar to find Kieran slumped against the wall, clutching his left shoulder, which was darkened with blood. Standing over him was a tall man wearing a marshal's badge with two armed deputies behind him. "Lily," Kieran said, relief washing over his pale features. "You're safe." The marshal turned, surprised by her sudden appearance. "Madam," he said, touching his hat brim. "Marshal Dawson." "You must be Miss Graham?" "Yes," Lily confirmed, hurrying to Kieran's side. "He's been shot. We need to stop the bleeding." As she tore strips from her petticoat to bind the wound, Marshal Dawson explained his timely arrival. "Stevens rode into town this morning, told me about Reeves showing up here, said he was worried for you folks." He watched as Lily worked on Kieran's shoulder. "Good thing he did. Reeves and his boys have been wanted for that stagecoach robbery. 5 people dead." "They thought I had the money," Lily said, securing the makeshift bandage. "The Wells Fargo payroll." "Funny thing about that," Dawson said, stroking his mustache. "Payroll was never on that coach. Company changed the route at the last minute due to the rumors about Reeves's gang. What got stolen was an empty strongbox and some passenger valuables." Kieran let out a short laugh, then winced at the pain it caused. "So all this was for nothing." "Not nothing," the marshal corrected. "Got us a good look at Reeves and his crew. We'll track them down now." He nodded toward Kieran's shoulder. "How bad is it?" "Bullet went through," Lily reported. "Clean from what I can tell, but he's lost blood and there's risk of infection." "Doc Wilson's back in town," Dawson said. "We can take him in our wagon." "No need," Kieran insisted, attempting to stand. "I can ride." "Don't be stubborn," Lily scolded, pressing him back down. "You're in no condition to sit a horse." To her surprise, Kieran didn't argue further. He allowed the marshal and his deputies to help him into their wagon, with Lily climbing in beside him to keep pressure on the wound. The journey to town was tense, every jolt of the wagon drawing a suppressed groan from Kieran. Lily kept up a steady stream of reassurances, more to comfort herself than him, she suspected. By the time they reached the small settlement of Clearwater, Kieran was feverish, his skin hot to the touch. Doc Wilson, a grizzled man with kind eyes, took one look at him and ordered him carried directly to the room behind his office. "You his wife?" the doctor asked Lily as he cut away Kieran's bloodied shirt. "No," she said, then added more firmly, "but I'm staying." Wilson nodded, apparently satisfied. "Good. I'll need the help." For the next hour, Lily assisted as the doctor cleaned and dressed Kieran's wound, administered laudanum for the pain, and treated the developing fever with cool compresses. Throughout, Kieran drifted in and out of consciousness, occasionally murmuring her name. "He'll live," Doc Wilson pronounced finally. "Bullet missed anything vital. Keep him quiet for a few days and he should mend fine." "Thank you," Lily said, sinking into a chair beside the bed. "I'll stay with him." The doctor studied her for a moment. "You care for him," he observed. It wasn't a question. Lily met his gaze steadily. "I do," Wilson nodded, as if confirming something to himself. "Lynch is a good man. Keeps to himself mostly, but he's always ready to help a neighbor in need." He gathered his supplies. "Whatever brought you two together, I'd say it was fortunate for both of you." As the doctor left, Lily turned her attention back to Kieran. In sleep, his face was relaxed, the habitual guardedness gone. She reached out, gently brushing a lock of dark hair from his forehead. "You scared me," she whispered. "Don't do that again." To her surprise, Kieran's eyes fluttered open. "Can't promise that," he murmured, his voice rough with pain. "Trouble seems to find me." "Hush," Lily scolded gently. "You need to rest." He caught her hand as she adjusted the compress on his forehead. "Lily." His blue eyes, though clouded with pain, were intent on her face. "What I was trying to say before Reeves showed up." "It can wait," she assured him. "You're hurt. We'll talk when you're stronger." "No," he tightened his grip on her hand. "Needs saying now." He took a breath, wincing slightly. "That cabin I'm building, it's not just for your protection or your reputation." Lily's heart quickened. "No, no." Kieran's gaze held hers. "It's because I want you to stay, not as my employee or my partner. As—" he hesitated, vulnerability plain on his face, "as more than that, if you want." The simple declaration, so earnestly delivered, brought tears to Lily's eyes. "I want," she whispered. "I've wanted that for a while now." Relief softened his features. "Good," he said, his voice growing drowsy as the laudanum took effect. "That's good." As Kieran drifted back to sleep, Lily remained beside him, her hand in his, her heart fuller than she could have imagined possible when she'd stumbled onto his property weeks ago. Kieran's recovery was slow but steady. For 3 days, he remained at Doc Wilson's, with Lily leaving his side only to fetch meals from the nearby hotel. On the 4th day, against the doctor's advice but with Lily's reluctant assistance, he insisted on returning to the ranch. "Cattle need tending," he argued as Lily helped him onto his horse. "And that cabin won't finish itself." "The cabin can wait," Lily countered, mounting the mare that Marshal Dawson had lent her. "Your health comes first." Kieran gave her a look that was half exasperation, half fondness. A man laid up 2 long starts to feel useless, bad for the spirit. The ride home was taken at a gentle pace, with frequent stops to rest Kieran's still healing shoulder. As they crested the final ridge overlooking the ranch, both reined in their horses, startled by the sight that greeted them. The yard was filled with people, at least a dozen men working on Lily's cabin, while women bustled around a cookfire. Wagons and horses were scattered about, creating the impression of a small, industrious village. "What in the world?" Kieran murmured. As they approached, Jim Stevens looked up from where he was fitting a window frame and let out a whoop. "Lynch is back, and Miss Graham." The work stopped as everyone turned to greet them. Lily recognized faces from their brief visit to town: the blacksmith, the general store owner, the Stevenses, and other neighboring ranchers, some from properties she knew were miles away. "What's all this?" Kieran asked as he dismounted carefully. Jim stepped forward, grinning. "Heard you were laid up. Figured your place could use some looking after." He gestured toward the cabin, which had progressed remarkably in their absence. "Thought we'd finish this up for you. Got the windows in, chimneys done, just putting the finishing touches on the inside now." Lily looked around, overwhelmed by the generosity on display. "I don't know what to say," she managed. "Thank you, all of you." Martha Stevens approached, her newborn son bundled against her chest. "It's us who should be thanking you, Miss Graham, for what you did for me and my boy." She smiled warmly. "Besides, neighbors help neighbors out here. It's how we all survive." As the work resumed, Kieran was guided to a seat near the cookfire, where he was immediately surrounded by well-wishers. Lily found herself pulled toward the cabin by a group of women eager to show her the interior. The transformation was remarkable. What had been a simple shell when they left was now a cozy dwelling. The walls had been chinked with clay and straw, a proper wooden floor laid, and simple curtains hung at the windows. A small iron stove had been installed in one corner, and beside it stood a rocking chair that someone had clearly brought from their own home. "It's beautiful," Lily said, turning in a slow circle to take it all in. "I never expected." "We all pitched in what we could," explained Mrs. Baker, the general store owner's wife. "That quilt's from the Mason girls, the table and chairs from the Hendersons." The stove was sitting unused in the Wilsons' barn. "I don't know how to thank you all," Lily said, genuine emotion making her voice unsteady. Mrs. Baker patted her arm. Just be happy here, dear, that's thanks enough. By evening, the work was complete. A celebratory supper was served outdoors, with everyone gathered around the cookfire sharing food and stories. Kieran, though clearly tired, sat among them, a newfound ease in his manner that Lily hadn't seen before. As the stars appeared overhead, someone produced a fiddle and impromptu dancing began on the packed earth of the yard. Lily watched, smiling, as Jim Stevens twirled his wife carefully, mindful of the baby she still carried. Quite a day, Kieran said, appearing beside her. He looked pale but determined. You should be resting, Lily admonished gently. He shook his head. Been resting for days. He held out his good hand. Dance with me, Kieran, your shoulder is fine. He smiled, that rare, transformative smile that never failed to quicken her pulse. One dance. Slow. Unable to resist, Lily placed her hand in his. He led her to the edge of the makeshift dance floor, drawing her carefully into his arms as the fiddler began a gentle waltz. I've never done this before, Kieran admitted as they swayed together. Danced? Lily asked, surprised. Held a woman I cared about while people watched, he clarified, his voice low. Makes a statement out here. Lily felt a warmth spread through her that had nothing to do with the nearby fire. What statement is that? Kieran's blue eyes met hers, serious despite his smile. That you're mine. And I'm yours, if that's what you want. The directness of his words took Lily's breath away. In Boston, courtship was a game of hints and subtle signals, of chaperoned visits and carefully worded letters. This plain speaking, this honest declaration of intent was both terrifying and exhilarating. It is what I want, she said softly. Very much. His arm tightened around her waist. Good, because I'm done pretending I don't feel what I feel for you. They danced in silence for a moment, the music weaving around them, the stars bright overhead. What happens now? Lily asked finally. Now, Kieran considered. Now I finish healing. We get the ranch ready for winter, and if you're still sure about this come spring, we ride into town and see the preacher. He looked down at her, a question in his eyes. Unless that's too fast for you. Lily thought about all that had happened since she'd fled Boston. The stagecoach attack that should have killed her. The days of wandering that should have broken her, finding Kieran or him finding her when all hope seemed lost. Not too fast, she decided. Life's too uncertain to waste time when you know what you want. Kieran's smile deepened. That's a very Western attitude, Miss Graham. I'm learning, she replied, returning his smile. As the dance ended, their guests began to depart, loading up wagons and mounting horses with calls of good night and promises to visit soon. Jim Stevens was the last to leave, clapping Kieran on his good shoulder. Don't worry about your stock for the next few days, he said. Me and the boys will ride over and check on them until you're back on your feet. When they were finally alone, Kieran took Lily's hand and led her toward her new cabin. A lantern had been lit inside, casting a warm glow through the windows. Home, he said simply, gesturing toward the door. Lily looked from the cabin to the man beside her, a wave of emotion threatening to overwhelm her. I never thought I'd have this, she admitted. A place that's truly mine. It is yours, Kieran confirmed. Always will be, no matter what happens between us. He paused, then added softly, though I'm hoping what happens is a long life together. Lily reached up, touching his cheek gently. So am I. He turned his head, pressing a kiss to her palm. Get some rest, he murmured. Tomorrow's a new day. As Lily watched him walk back to the main cabin, moving carefully to protect his injured shoulder, she felt a certainty she'd never known before. This place, this man, this was where she belonged. Not as a daughter fulfilling her father's ambitions or a wife enduring a loveless marriage, but as herself. Lily Graham, who had found strength she never knew she possessed, and love she'd never dared to hope for. Inside her new cabin, she lit a lamp and looked around at the simple, beautiful space that the community had created for her. The quilt on the bed, the curtains at the windows, The rocking chair by the stove, each item a testament to the generosity of neighbors who had, in one afternoon, made her feel more welcome than a lifetime in Boston society ever had. As she prepared for bed, Lily found herself thinking of the future not with anxiety, as she once had, but with joyful anticipation. Spring seemed a long way off, but she knew the winter months would be filled with their own kind of magic. Cozy evenings by the fire, learning the rhythms of ranch life, building a future with Kieran one day at a time. In the months that followed, Lily's prediction proved true. As winter settled over the Montana landscape, blanketing the ranch in snow and limiting their contact with the outside world, she and Kieran fell into a routine that felt as natural as breathing. Each morning they would rise before dawn, Kieran to tend to the livestock, Lily to prepare breakfast and see to the household tasks. As his shoulder healed, Kieran began teaching Lily the basics of ranch work, how to mend fences, care for horses, even the rudiments of roping and riding. In the evenings, they would alternate between his cabin and hers, sharing meals and conversation. Sometimes Kieran would read aloud from one of the few books he owned, his deep voice bringing the words to life as Lily mended clothing or worked on the quilt she was making for their future home together. Physical affection between them was restrained, but meaningful, a touch of hands as they passed tools, a brush of lips against a forehead, an embrace that lingered just long enough to convey what words could not. Both were conscious of propriety, even in their isolation, respecting the boundaries they'd set until spring and their planned wedding. News reached them periodically, carried by the occasional traveler brave enough to make the journey through the snow. Marshal Dawson had tracked Reeves and his gang into the mountains, capturing 2 of the outlaws, though Reeves himself had escaped. The stagecoach line had resumed service, with armed guards now accompanying every coach. It was late February when the most unexpected news arrived, delivered by a half-frozen mail carrier who stopped at the ranch seeking shelter from a blizzard. "Letter for Miss Lily Graham," he announced over supper, producing a somewhat battered envelope from his bag. "Been following it from Boston to Virginia City to here. Postmaster in town said you might be out this way." Lily accepted the letter with trembling hands, recognizing her father's handwriting on the envelope. "Thank you," she murmured, setting it aside unopened. Later, when she and Kieran were alone, she stared at the letter as if it might bite. "You don't have to read it," Kieran said gently. "Not if you don't want to." "I should know what it says," Lily replied. "He wouldn't have gone to such lengths to find me if it wasn't important." Taking a deep breath, she broke the seal and unfolded the single sheet of paper within. "My dear daughter, your disappearance has caused considerable distress and embarrassment to this family. Mr. Blackwood has withdrawn his offer of marriage and financial assistance, leaving Graham shipping in dire circumstances. I have recently learned from the Wells Fargo office that you survived the unfortunate incident with the Blackwater stagecoach. While I am naturally relieved to hear of your survival, I must insist that you return to Boston immediately to fulfill your duty to this family. A ticket has been purchased in your name for the eastbound train from Helena, departing the first Monday of each month. Present yourself at the station and it will be honored. Your father, Jonathan Graham." Lily read the letter twice, then handed it silently to Kieran. As he scanned the contents, his expression darkened. "Duty," he said flatly, returning the letter. That's all he has to say about nearly losing his daughter, about forcing her into marriage with a man 3 times her age. "That's my father," Lily said, a strange calm settling over her. "Practical to a fault." "What will you do?" Kieran asked, his voice carefully neutral. Lily looked at him, this man who had saved her in every way a person could be saved, who had given her shelter when she had none, who had built her a home with his own hands, who had shown her what real love looked like. "Nothing," she said simply. "I'm exactly where I want to be." Relief washed over Kieran's features. He took her hand, pressing it to his lips. "I was afraid," he admitted, "that Boston might still have a hold on you. Boston was never my home, Lily said softly. Not really, this is. The next morning, Lily wrote a brief reply to her father, explaining her decision to remain in Montana and build a new life. She made no mention of Kieran or their plans to marry. Those details were precious, private, not to be shared with someone who had never truly seen her for who she was. As winter gradually released its grip on the land, the ranch began to stir with new life. Calves were born, the garden soil was turned in preparation for planting, and plans for the coming year took shape. One crisp March morning, as Lily was hanging laundry to dry in the strengthening sun, she heard the now familiar sound of approaching riders. Looking up, she saw Marshal Dawson and two deputies making their way toward the ranch house. Kieran emerged from the barn, wiping his hands on a rag as he moved to greet them. Lily joined him, a flicker of apprehension in her chest. "Lynch," Dawson called as he dismounted. "Miss Graham, good to see you both looking well." "Marshal," Kieran acknowledged. "What brings you out this way?" Dawson removed his hat, turning it in his hands. "Got news I thought you'd want to hear in person. We caught Reeves." Lily's breath caught. "Caught him? Where?" "Trying to rob the bank in Helena," Dawson said with a grim smile. "Got greedy, got careless. He won't be troubling anyone again. Judge sentenced him to hang next week." Relief washed over Lily. The shadow that had hung over them since her arrival was finally lifted. "There's more," Dawson continued. "Found this in his saddlebags." He reached into his coat and withdrew a folded document. "It's a wanted poster. For you, Miss Graham." Lily took the paper with trembling hands. There, beneath a crude sketch that bore only a passing resemblance to her, were the words, "Wanted, Lily Graham for theft and absconding with family property. $500 reward for return to Jonathan Graham, Boston, Massachusetts." "My father," she whispered, shocked despite herself. "He's trying to have me arrested." Kieran's face darkened with anger. "Can he do that?" Dawson shrugged. "Legally, depends on what she supposedly stole. But practically speaking, no law officer in Montana is going to arrest a woman for running from a forced marriage." He smiled reassuringly at Lily. "Just thought you should know, in case other copies of that poster are circulating." "Thank you, Marshal," Lily said, still staring at the poster. "I appreciate the warning." After Dawson and his deputies had departed, Lily stood in the yard, the wanted poster clutched in her hand, emotions warring within her. Anger at her father's tactics. Fear that he might still somehow reach across the continent to control her fate. And beneath it all, a deep sadness for the family bond that had been irreparably broken. Kieran approached, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You all right?" Lily nodded slowly. "I will be." She looked up at him, finding strength in the steadiness of his gaze. "It's just final somehow. Seeing it in print." "Your father's a fool," Kieran said quietly, "to throw away a daughter like you for money." "Yes," Lily agreed, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. "He is." That evening they built a fire in the yard between their two cabins. As the flames leapt toward the star-filled sky, Lily took the wanted poster and with deliberate movements tore it into pieces and fed it to the fire. "There," she said, watching the paper blacken and curl. "That's the last of Boston." Kieran stepped closer, taking her hand. "No regrets." Lily shook her head. "None." He studied her face in the firelight as if memorizing every feature. "I've been thinking," he said finally, "about spring and our plans." "Yes," Lily prompted when he hesitated. "Why wait?" Kieran asked simply. "The preacher comes through Clearwater next week. The weather's fair for traveling. We could ride in, speak our vows, and be back before the new moon." Joy bloomed in Lily's chest, bright and fierce. "Yes," she said without hesitation. "Let's not wait another day longer than we must." Kieran's smile was like sunrise after the longest night. He drew her into his arms, his kiss a promise of all that was to come. The wedding was simple but perfect. Lily wore her best dress, freshly washed and adorned with wildflowers gathered that morning. Kieran had a new shirt, ordered specially from the general store in town. The ceremony took place in Clearwater's small church, with the Stevenses standing as witnesses and a handful of townspeople and neighboring ranchers in attendance. "I, Kieran, take you, Lily, to be my lawfully wedded wife," he vowed, his voice steady and sure. "To have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do us part." Lily repeated the words, her heart so full she thought it might burst. When the preacher pronounced them man and wife, the small congregation erupted in cheers and well wishes. The ride back to the ranch was filled with a joyous anticipation that made every mile seem both endless and fleeting. As they crested the final ridge, the now familiar sight of their home spread before them: the main cabin, the barn, the corral, and Lily's smaller cabin nestled nearby. Kieran reined in his horse, Lily doing the same beside him. They sat for a moment, surveying their domain in the golden light of late afternoon. "Mrs. Lynch," Kieran said, testing the sound of her new name. "Welcome home." Lily smiled, happiness radiating through her like sunlight. "It's good to be home." As they approached the ranch yard, Lily noticed something different. A new sign had been erected near the gate, freshly painted and gleaming in the sun. It read simply, "Lynch Ranch, Kieran and Lily." "When did you do this?" she asked, touched by the gesture. "Had Jim put it up while we were in town," Kieran admitted. "Wanted you to see it when we returned." He reached across the space between their horses, taking her hand. "This is our place now, truly ours." That night, as husband and wife, they crossed the threshold of the main cabin together. Inside, Kieran had made preparations: fresh linens on the bed, wildflowers in a jar on the table, a bottle of wine procured from the general store for the occasion. As the stars appeared in the vast Montana sky, they discovered each other anew, their union blessed by love, respect, and a shared vision of the future they would build together. Later, as Lily lay in the circle of Kieran's arms, listening to the steady beat of his heart, she marveled at the journey that had brought her here. From a frightened young woman fleeing an unwanted marriage to a wife and partner in a life of her own choosing, it seemed both miraculous and perfectly right. "What are you thinking?" Kieran murmured, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "That I'm exactly where I'm meant to be," Lily answered truthfully. "And that I'm grateful for every step of the path that led me here, even the painful ones." Kieran tightened his arm around her. "Even the stagecoach robbery, even that," Lily confirmed. "Without it, I might never have found you." "You'd have found your way," he said with quiet confidence. "You're stronger than you know." Lily smiled against his chest. "Perhaps, but I'm glad it was your land I stumbled onto, your door I knocked on." "So am I," Kieran said softly. "More than I can say." Spring flowed into summer, and summer into fall. The ranch flourished under their combined efforts: Kieran's knowledge of cattle and horses, complemented by Lily's talent for organization and planning. They expanded the garden, added chickens and a milk cow, and began improvements to the main cabin that would make it more comfortable for the family they hoped to have. Lily's smaller cabin wasn't abandoned. Instead, it became her special domain, a place where she taught reading and basic arithmetic to the children from neighboring ranches once a week. Her dream of being a teacher had found expression after all, in a way she could never have imagined in Boston. It was during one of these teaching sessions, as winter once again approached, that Lily first felt the flutter of movement in her womb, the first greeting from the child who would arrive with the spring thaw. That evening, as she and Kieran sat before the fire in their now expanded cabin, she shared the news. "A baby," Kieran repeated, wonder and joy transforming his face. "Our baby." "Due in April, I think," Lily confirmed, placing his hand over the still flat plane of her stomach. A new life to match the new growth outside. Kieran pulled her into his arms, his kiss filled with all the love and promise of their shared future. "I'll build a cradle," he said when they parted, "and a proper bedroom for the little one." "Always building," Lily teased gently. "First my cabin, now nursery furniture." "Building is what I do," Kieran replied, his eyes soft with love. "When you arrived here, you said you had no place to go. I wanted to make sure you always had a place that was yours." He touched her cheek gently. "A place where you belonged." "You did," Lily whispered, covering his hand with her own. "You built me more than a cabin, Kieran. You built me a home, a life, a future." Outside, the first snowflakes of winter began to fall, dusting the Montana landscape with white. Inside, wrapped in each other's arms, Kieran and Lily Lynch watched the dancing flames and dreamed of spring, of new life, and of all the years of happiness that stretched before them. For Lily, who had once fled across a continent seeking freedom, the greatest discovery had been that true freedom wasn't found in escape, but in belonging in the love of a good man, in land worked with her own hands, in a community that valued strength and kindness in equal measure. And for Kieran, the solitary rancher who had once believed his past had marked him too deeply for happiness, the miracle was simpler still. That in offering shelter to a woman with nowhere to go, he had found his own way home at last.